Hey, what's up guys? My name is Courtney and welcome to Crime and Tumblers. So if you're new here, I just work on my Tumblrs and I talk about some true crime cases that I've done some research on. This channel was suggested by one of my subscribers on my other channel. I'll have that channel down in my description. That's the channel where I actually go over like Tumblr tutorials and all of that fun stuff. And the case that I have for you today is kind of a doozy. And it aggravates me. Like, all of these cases aggravate me, but this one just for some reason really grinded my gears. And this is the case of Cassie Jo Stoddart, I believe is how you say her last name. Have you guys ever seen the movie Scream? Like the actual horror movie Scream. The killers of this case wanted to make something similar to that movie. So, Cassie Jo Stoddart, she was born December 21st in 1989. She was the middle child. She had, I believe, a younger brother and an older sister. And she lived with her grandparents. From everything I've read, she still had like a decent relationship with her parents, I guess, but she lived with her grandparents for whatever reason. And they lived in Pocatello, Idaho, I believe is how you say it. And Cassie was a junior in high school. She was 16 years old, and she was a very pretty girl, very sweet. Everyone seemed to really like her. And she had a boyfriend, his name was Matt. And they all went to the same school, and I guess Matt and Cassie would hang out at Cassie's house a lot. Like, they would spend a lot of time together, and it was always at Cassie's house. So I feel like any 16-year-old, Cassie wanted to save up her money and buy her own car. So what she would do is do little jobs like babysitting. She had some younger cousins that lived pretty close to her, and she would go and babysit them. She wanted to show everybody that she was responsible, and so she would do these little babysitting jobs to save up her money to buy her own car. So her aunt and uncle wanted to go out of town. I don't know if it was like a vacation or what, but they knew that Cassie was, you know, saving up her money and everything to buy a car. So they asked her if she would stay at their house for the entire weekend and do like some house sitting pretty much, and just like take care of their animals. They had some cats and some dogs, and they just wanted somebody there to feed them and water them, take care of them, whatever had to be done. And so Cassie jumped all over this because she knew it would be a really good opportunity for her to make some money for that car. So the weekend of September 20th, 2006, Cassie went to her aunt and uncle's house to start the weekend over there. And it was a pretty big house, and I guess, you know, being there alone kind of like creeped her out a little bit, which I guess it would me too. It was a pretty big house, you know, you're all alone. She was only 16. So she asked her aunt if her boyfriend, Matt, could come over. And her aunt said she was totally fine with it. She knew that Cassie was a really good kid. Like, she wasn't going to do anything crazy. So she was like, yeah, you know, I like Matt too. Like, he can come over. So now she's not alone anymore, so that made her feel a lot better. And I guess her and Matt were sitting there watching a movie. And I think they were going to watch, from what I've read, it was Kill Bill, the movie Kill Bill, and not that it matters, but just a little detail. So Matt ended up inviting a couple of his friends over, Matt and Tori, and they all went to the same school together. And so Cassie gives them a tour of the house, and you know, she was kind of aggravated because she just wanted to hang out with her boyfriend. She didn't really want any other people there, and plus she only asked her aunt if her boyfriend could come over. She didn't, you know, say that anybody else was coming over. And so they start watching this movie, and Brian and Tori, I keep wanting to say Tony, but it's Tori. Brian and Tori said, you know, like, we thought this was going to be a house party, and this is really boring, so we're going to leave. We're just going to go to the movie theater and watch something there. So they leave, and Cassie was kind of happy about that because, like, now she's just got her boyfriend to hang out with, right? So, like, 15 minutes after they left, their power goes out. 15 minutes after Brian and Tori leave, the power goes out where Cassie and her boyfriend Matt are staying. And, you know, this kind of freaked out Cassie quite a bit. And, you know, her boyfriend Matt was just like, you know, it's just the power, chill out, calm down, whatever. And a few minutes later, some of the power comes back on, but not all of it. And which, I mean, to me would be kind of weird that not all of the power would come back on. But they didn't go do any investigating. I don't know if they were like too scared to, or they just didn't think it was necessary, whatever. So they didn't like go down to the basement and check the breaker box or anything like that. So one of the dogs that was there at the home that Cassie was looking over was standing at the basement steps and kind of like looking down into the basement and kept barking, which would freak me out. Like, I would have been gone. I would have left. So Matt calls his mom and he's like, listen, Mom, like, this is what's going on at the house. It's really scaring Cassie. Can I stay the night here with her? And Matt's mom was like, no, absolutely not. You know, like, you're 16, you're not staying the night alone with your girlfriend, which I understand that. So, like, no bad thoughts towards Matt's mom for that. So at 11 p.m., Matt's mom comes and picks him up, and again, he's like, can I please stay here? Like, she's really freaked out, and his mom's like really persistent, like, no, you're not staying, but Cassie can come stay with us if she wants. If she's really scared, she can come stay with us. And Cassie was like, no, I can't do that because I promised my aunt and uncle that I would stay here and look after the dogs and watch their house. So she was a really, really responsible 16-year-old. So after Matt leaves, Cassie goes back inside and sits on the couch and starts watching her movie. And a few minutes later, the power goes out again. And instead of going and looking, she just stays on the couch. So she doesn't go downstairs. I mean, at this point, she's completely alone, so I'm sure poor thing is probably absolutely petrified. So 2 days later, Cassie's aunt and uncle and Cassie's 13-year-old cousin comes home from their vacation or whatever it was. I'm not completely sure why they went out of town. But anyway, they come home 2 days later, and the 13-year-old cousin gets in the house first, and the door was unlocked, which she thought was kind of weird. So she makes her way to the living room, and she finds Cassie laying in a pool of blood, dead in the floor. So of course this poor 13-year-old girl screams, and the family comes in and they find Cassie, so they're freaking out, obviously. They call 911, the police show up, and investigators actually put Cassie's aunt and uncle and her 13-year-old cousin in a hotel for a couple of weeks while they're investigating this. I don't know if it's because they just wanted everybody like out of the house so no evidence could be messed with, or if it's because maybe they thought their family was being targeted, so they just like kind of hid them somewhere. I'm not sure. So from what police can gather looking around the house, they can tell that this was not a robbery. Nothing in the house was messed with. There was nothing stolen. There was a lot of really expensive stuff lying around. You know, there was money, there was jewelry, there was all kinds of stuff in this really big, nice house. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was messed with. Like, there was no chairs knocked over or papers messed with, like literally nothing. So this makes police believe that whoever did this to Cassie, she must have known them or she willingly let them in. The autopsy confirms that Cassie was stabbed 30 times and 12 of them were fatal. So of course, Cassie's boyfriend Matt was the first one to be talked to by police. As far as they know, he was the last one that was with her. So he's a suspect. They go and talk to him, and they thought he was acting very suspicious because he was not showing any emotion. Like, he wasn't sad, he wasn't crying, he wasn't scared, nothing. He was just completely emotionless talking to police. So, you know, they tell Matt, tell us what happened. Was there anybody else in the home? And Matt tells them, you know, yeah, I had my friends Brian and Tori over, but they left. They said they were bored and they were going to go watch a movie. So now police are like, okay, there's somebody else that we need to talk to. There's two other people. So police bring in Brian and Tori, and they're questioning them, asking them to tell them, you know, like what happened. So police find out that Brian and Tori are like really, really into movies, especially scary movies. And they really like to film their own movies. I guess they're like aspiring movie creators or whatever you would call it. And they have cameras and they film everything. Like, they film their day-to-day lives. They just like vlog everything. So a little bit about Brian. He considered himself an outcast, and he had a pretty big crush on Cassie, but you know, she wasn't interested. She said she had a boyfriend, so she kind of declined that, and it upset Brian, but he just kind of went on with everything. He got over it, and they were all friends. And something else kind of odd about Brian is that he was very, very fascinated by the Columbine shootings. He really looked up to the people that did it because he said that they represented the outcasts. And so he really looked up to them and said that he wanted to do something like that one day. The police talked to Brian and Tori, and they say that, yeah, they were at that house with Cassie and Matt, but they left because they thought it was going to be this big house party, and it wasn't, and they were bored, and so they were going to go to the movie theaters to see a movie. And they actually had ticket stubs to the movie holes. So that was kind of like their alibi of, yeah, we were here, we were at the movies. So I guess for a couple of days, police are kind of stumped, and so they decide to bring Matt back in to question him for a second time. They're thinking, you know, maybe we can get him to crack, or maybe we can get him to give us some more information to lead us in the right direction. So they give Matt a polygraph test, and I guess he passed with flying colors. Like, he said he didn't have anything to do with it. He doesn't know exactly what happened. So they kind of pushed Matt off of their suspect list, and they wanted to talk to Brian and Tori again. So before talking to Brian and Tori, police go to the movie theater that they said they went to and talked to some of the employees that were there that night. And they spoke to the girl that was working the ticket booth, and she actually goes to school with all of everybody I'm talking about here. You know, Cassie, Matt, Brian, and Tori. So she goes to the same school as all of them, and police ask her, like, do you know Brian and Tori? And she says, yes, I go to school with them. So police say, were they here on Friday night? And she says, no, absolutely not. I know for a fact they weren't, because I would have remembered seeing them because I was the one giving everybody their movie tickets that night. So now police are like, all right. So they bring in Brian and Tori again for questioning, and they are talking to Brian. And this is 5 days after the murder. Brian immediately seems very, very upset. He starts crying. He's like really super stressed, and police are like, yes, like, we got it. It's either him or he's going to tell us who it is. He knows something, whatever. So Brian goes on to tell police that during the short time that him and Tori were at the house with Cassie and Matt, he had gotten up saying that he had to go use the bathroom. And instead of going to the bathroom, he went down into the basement and he unlocked the basement door that led outside. And he said that him and Tori planned on playing a prank on Matt and Cassie to scare them. He told them that they were leaving their house to go to the movies, but really they just like went down the street and they put on these creepy costumes, and it was like clown masks and all black clothing, and they had knives and everything. But they said it was just going to be a prank. So a few minutes after Brian and Tori had left, saying that they were going to go to the movies, they come back and they sneak into the basement door that Brian had unlocked, and they started like making some noises downstairs in the basement, hoping that somebody would go downstairs to investigate, and then they were going to just pop out and scare them. So after nobody was like responding to any of the noises that they were making downstairs, they decided to mess around with the breaker box and turn all the lights off. And so, you know, nobody ever went down there to check, so they were just kind of like hanging out for a while. They were going to wait and then try again. So when Matt leaves, when Matt's mom comes and picks him up and he leaves, they were like, okay, we're still going to mess with Cassie. And according to Brian, Tori, I guess, got like all hyped up, and he was saying like, we're going to do it. We're going to kill Cassie. We have to do this. We got to do it. So they end up sneaking up the stairs, and they go into where Cassie's at, and Brian says that Tori brutally attacks her and stabs her. Brian says Tori stabbed Cassie over and over, but Brian claims that he never touched Cassie. Then eventually Brian admits that he did stab Cassie like 3 times, but he only did it because Tori told him to, and he said that Tori was like so crazy and amped up at the moment that he was scared of him, so he just did anything that Tori told him to do. So after Cassie was dead, they gathered up all of the evidence, like the clothing and the knives and everything, and they buried it in the woods. And Brian took investigators to the exact spot that they had buried all of the evidence, and police dug it up, and they found the clothing, they found the clown masks, they found the knives, and they find a video camera. Remember I told you that Brian and Tori consider themselves like amateur movie makers and they like to film everything. Well, their dumbasses filmed this entire thing. I mean, I'm glad they did, but still, like, geez. So, while watching the films, police find that the day that the murder took place, Brian and Tori were talking about how they were going to kill somebody that day, and like they were talking to the camera, and Tori said that they chose Cassie to kill, and they were sorry to Cassie's family, but they just have to do it. So this next part is kind of like awkward and weird, so I'm sorry. So on the tapes, Brian was talking about how excited he was to kill somebody, and then Tori said, "I'm so horny just thinking about it." Like thinking about killing Cassie. So unfortunately, they did not film the murder. And I say unfortunately because it's like that part was missing and police couldn't look at exactly what was going on. But they did film after the murder. They filmed themselves in the car leaving Cassie's house after they killed her. They said how they wanted to go down in history like big serial killers like Ted Bundy and all those people. So there was also video evidence at a pawn shop of both boys going in there and buying knives, and it turns out one of the knives that was bought from the pawn shop was used to kill Cassie. So right then and there, that helps police know that this was not an accident, this was premeditated, and them boys are in some deep shit. Of course, the boys are blaming one another. Brian said it was Tori, Tori says it was Brian, but on September 27th, 2006, both boys were arrested. And those boys did not stand a chance in court. They had really no case for them. Like, they didn't have anything to say that was going to help them get out of it in any way, shape, or form. And according to DNA analysis, Cassie's DNA was found on one of the knives and one of the pieces of clothing, like one of the outfits, and all of those items belonged to Brian. So of course Tori's defense team used all of this to try and help his case, and it did not help him. Also on the tape that the boys recorded leaving Cassie's house in the car, or Cassie's aunt and uncle's house in the car, sorry, but they were like super excited, and Brian was saying, "I killed Cassie, I can't believe I did it, I killed Cassie," like, and Tori didn't say anything on film. So there was no like, "We killed Cassie, we did it," and like the other person be like, "Yeah, we did." It was all Brian saying, "I killed Cassie." So Tori's defense team, like I said, tried to use all of this, and it did not work. And remember the 13-year-old cousin that walked in and found Cassie? This really, really messed her up. I mean, it would probably mess anybody up walking in your house and finding a family member dead. So this 13-year-old girl actually tried to commit suicide. Like, she fell into a really, really deep depression, and the family tried to sell that home, and nobody will buy it because of all of the events that happened in the home. And so the whole family is just under like this really deep depression. So both boys were convicted and sentenced to life in prison for first-degree murder, and they were also sentenced to 30 years for conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. So that is my story of the Cassie Jo Stoddart case. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will be back next week for another video. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments, and I will see you next week. Bye!